episode. We are episode 4. Wow, 4 of season 3. We ended out last episode talking about a lot of the responsibilities that we hold. We touched on sort of the racial cultural aspect, but also the leadership aspect of the ways that we, or I, push through in order to make things work, and pushing through a level of resilience in order to make this work. And looking at that level of responsibility, though, Gaylisa also touched on these places of like, how can I show up well for other people? And looking at levels of responsibility, though, what we need to acknowledge is that in the midst of our own valleys, right, like life is still happening. We talked about context or talking to people outside of us, but like adulthood is still happening. We still need to show up to all of the things that are not school and work in a way that also takes its toll. And in showing up to these places and showing up in these ways, we talked season 2, episode 1, season 2.
Yes, it was about adults.
We said that we don't adult alone, right? And that was a whole mic drop episode. But the fact that adulting doesn't mean that we do it by ourselves, but we do this in community well. In this, though, I think all of us have experienced these areas of holding responsibility, being in community, and then being asked, how are you, right? For the people in our lives who are super intentional, they're going to check in and say, how are you doing? It's been a while. Let's catch up. I want to hear your heart, especially the ones who know to be therapists.
They want to hear your heart.
It's your famous question is, what's the weather in your heart?
Yeah. Listen, I heard it from someone else. I'm like, that's good. What's the weather like in your heart? And so people being really intentional ask us these questions of how are you? How's the weather in your heart? And I think for me, at least, what's been the challenging place, and I want to hear you guys' take on it. What's been the challenging place in this, as I think about it, is in the place of the valley. How am I choosing to respond? Because we know that there's a response and then there's a response, right? And so kind of the question is, in navigating the valley, what level of vulnerability are you choosing to put out in the world with different people in the middle of it?
I already know. None. This is so weird because obviously we're going to therapy and it's like, okay, people are vulnerable with us, but I went through a time, I'm probably still going through it a little bit, where I hated this idea of like being vulnerable. And like I said, I think I said last episode, this idea of like feeling exposed. To me, I was like, I'm fine. I'm okay. Now, for the people who like pushed a little more, who just with the words that always got me was like, you don't seem like yourself. Like anytime my friends told me that, or like Kaylisa told me that, or like just times like people like would say those words, that for me was almost like the cracking point of like, okay, I do need to like say something. I do need to like be open and like honest with them, because it was also getting to a point where too, I wasn't being honest. Like I was straight up avoiding vulnerability meant that I was lying. And that was just what it was. Like I just didn't feel like I wanted to be exposed. I didn't want people to know that this is hard for me, or I was okay with people knowing this was hard for me, but I didn't want them to know how hard it was. You didn't need to know severity. You just needed to know this is a difficult time.
Period. Right there, that's all you need.
Yeah. That was kind of my reaction.
It's a tone. This is a difficult time.
This is a difficult time. And that's all you're gonna get from me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's taken growth to be vulnerable and be honest.
Yeah. I remember one day, we was in your office and we was talking about vulnerability, and I was like, bro, I think I actually have a problem with this. And yeah, this was I think this was sometime last year. I realized how difficult, because for me, my challenge with vulnerability is if I don't like how it feels and how it looks, I need to somewhat figure it out first before I need to somewhat package it well before I can give it to you. And this is my perfectionism. This is my how my relationship with perfectionism just looks. And wanted to kind of like tidy it up a little bit before it's actually seen by people. Because I don't want to deal with the reactions and maybe the, disappointment or just I need the response to be done well for the sake of me, who's already feeling undone and unwell. I get protective of like what the response might look like. And so I go into somewhat of a protective mode and distancing myself from what vulnerability looks like in order to somewhat protect that. Yeah. Now I'm also recognizing, yes, that is a protective place for me, but it's not also the most conducive and the most healthiest place for me relationally. And what it also does is that it doesn't create space and opportunity for other people to help me, which is something that I've had to more intentionally learn in this season of my life. Like, one of the issues for me is that with like receiving help from other people is that I don't want to ever be a burden to anybody. That is a deep concern for me. And so if I even breathe the idea that that is a concept, I'm running.
If I even breathe the idea.
She didn't even speak it, bro. She just breathed it.
Like, seriously, it bothers me. I don't want to be that kind of weight, but I've also recognized that in doing relationships well with people, a portion of that is going to happen where some element of spillage is going to happen, some element of carrying me is going to happen, and it might feel heavy, it might feel uncomfortable, whatever it might be. There might be some like weird tensions, whatever it might be. I have to allow myself to be comfortable with that. And so I think in the midst of my journey too, it's like learning those places where I am uncomfortable in relationships and learning to tolerate the discomfort that exists in the midst of it so that I can still show up well. I think for me, earlier on in my journey, it was very much of like masking. And then I was like, no, that is not authentic to me. I'm not doing that. So I got to a point of like saying like, no, I'm not within capacity. I'm not doing well. As people would ask me how I was doing. But in the midst of even doing that, it felt like a weird vulnerable fatigue. And I'm like, okay, so are people, because I'm wondering to myself now, I'm like, how are people now conceptualizing that or understanding that? Are they perceiving me as like making excuses? Are they perceiving me as just saying and doing too much and like get it together, like lacking resiliency, whatever it might be? There's this vulnerability fatigue and saying like that I'm not doing well or that things are struggle space for me in life that I was hesitant. I still allowed myself in some points to say it though. I became selective though in how much I was willing to disclose once I said how I was doing, depending on the person that I was talking to, depending on how I was feeling in the moment. Because I'm like, well, I get to choose to tell my story. I don't need to feel pressure by you or by anything when it comes to telling my story. I get to tell you how I'm doing. And so a part of that too is like me also owning my journey and owning my experience and doing this on my own terms. Because I think another thing too that I've been trying to be more intentional with myself is not people pleasing in the midst of how am I doing. And sometimes I fall back in it. But I want to be cognizant of not doing things to appease other people, but to be honest and authentic with myself.
I'm thinking of like this idea of interdependence in relationships. Like I have valued it so much more when I think about the friendships that I have now and just like the way there's this level of interdependence and the times where I could tell them like, yo, it's really I'm not doing well. I'm not doing well. But they're also able to tell me as well. So just being able to care for one another and not be a burden per se, or have like vulnerability hangovers, like what I call it, where I say something and I'm like, I wish I never told you.
Yeah, I regret that instantly. Let me add one more point on that too. I think something I also have to be cognizant of as I like respond to people and saying like how I'm doing is me not determining other people's like capacity for them. And because in my world, I'm surrounded by a bunch of therapists. And I'm cognizant of the emotional load that comes with that job. And I don't want to be in that space of like kind of dumping or anything of that nature. And so a lot of that is like also wanting to like protect their space, but it's also somewhat now me deciding for them what they can handle, which I don't think is fair in relationship. I had a conversation with one of my coworkers one time, and she was just checking in and wanting to know how I was doing. I was kind of like in that little weird hesitant bubble. But she said something to like the matter of like, I just want to know what's going on in your world. Not that I necessarily like want to fix it. Yeah. I just want to know. I want to be present with you. And I was like, oh,
that's a different concept.
That's a different concept to digest. I was like, okay, I had to then allow myself not to get into a protective place, but to just let it be, let the moment be.
Yeah.
So yeah. Remember the question?
I'm hearing, yeah. I'm in two places. I'm hearing what is being said and beginning to put labels to the process, as well as thinking through my own spaces. A lot of my spaces, I think, align with you guys' spaces. For the sake of labeling, I think what we're talking about, and what I'll be identifying with as well, is identifying places of transparency and places of vulnerability, and identifying that these are not the same thing.
No.
And for me to be transparent with you does not mean I'm being vulnerable. It is a level of allowing you to see me, but it takes out a place of risk that I get to determine what level of risk am I willing to step into when I hand you this information.
Yes.
I think secondly is like, what is my expectation when I hand you these things? And so what your coworker was saying is like, you don't need to hold the expectation that I will carry it for you.
Yeah.
But I am willing to know what is present. And I think that level of expectation really is part of what allows us to decide to whom and how we want to disclose this information. Vulnerability fatigue. I never had that word before, but it's a thing. And I realized it when people were asking me how I was, and I got sick of saying, I'm making it. I got sick of saying it because it just feels like I'm bringing myself deeper into the place by explaining all of the parts, while I know that people want to join me there, but also because in all of the places of my life, I am one who I like for things to be accurately communicated. And it feels like when I am letting you into the vulnerable spaces, it doesn't feel like it accurately communicates the fact that this place that I'm in is not all trash, right? Like we've been talking about the places of finding water or nourishment in the valley.
Yeah.
I don't think I am not always the best at being able to communicate the balance of nourishment and mud in the valley. And oftentimes if you ask me from a place of vulnerability, I want to communicate with you the mud. And I realized that I had to emphasize more the fact that like, but regardless of what I'm saying, God has still been faithful, and that doesn't minimize like who God is, and the things that I'm experiencing get to exist at the same time, as opposed to one shutting down the other. So my experiences definitely don't decrease who God is, but also the faithfulness of God doesn't decrease the validity of the things that I'm feeling in the middle of the valley.
Yes.
Holding these two. Original question, how do we enter this? Naturally, I'm a person who, for all of the things, it depends. It depends on who's asking. It depends on how I'm feeling. It depends on how you ask. And so for me, my natural, the go-to, especially in like lighthearted settings, is, it's fine. I'm fine. The things that we like, we just pull them out. One of mine for a long time became, adulting is ghetto. And they'd be like, and I'm like, we both understand. Adulting is ghetto. Or like life be life in. That was my thing. There became like a combo pack of life is life in, people be people in, but God be God in, right? And like all those three get to flow together. But I'm fine became a natural like place to sit, especially I think in the academic and professional world where we don't always feel the space to do that.
Yes.
Right? So when you get asked, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? It's a very natural like thing. Yeah. And so if it doesn't feel like an intentional ask, I'm not giving you an intentional answer.
Yeah.
That doesn't work for everyone, but I really learned that about myself in this time, of that like, if it feels like a generic, how are you? I'm going to give you the generic, I'm fine. And then if you are pausing and intentionally being like, no, but Danielle, really, like, how are you? Then that will determine kind of where I go from there. It all just depends.
Yeah, I think in our first episode we were talking about adulting, one of the things we talked about was like how adulting is like not done alone, and like the recognizing like we don't have to figure it out by ourselves, and how powerful it is to connect with other people as well, as we're going throughout this adulting process, and humbling oneself to do that, removing our pride, so that we can adult well.
I don't want to talk about pride.
No. On a real note, when I tell you, God be driving me at some places where I'm like, you really had to do that to me?
He be showing you yourself.
Yes, and in the end of January, God, like, I've been hearing from certain family members throughout my life of like, oh, didn't you have too much pride? And I was like, no, I don't, leave me alone. And then at the end of January, the Lord like pulled back the curtain. It was like, no, Danielle, pride is a real issue for you. And because of it, you don't want to ask for help. And out of you holding your pride and not asking for help, you are drowning, right? Even in academics, we're going through dissertation things. And in being a first generation college student, especially at this level of education, there's just some things I don't know, right? But even feeling, I didn't think it was pride at the time, but even the feelings of pride that prohibited me from asking the question. And so one day I was sitting on my floor and I was like, or not me, God was just like, no, pride is a real issue. Like, you need to be able to ask for help because you have literally come to the end of yourself. And so seeking that from people, but also from God, of just being like, I don't know. Like, I don't know how to do this. And I don't know what I don't know. Pride and the humbling process has been a real thing in this time.
You got something to say that, journey?
It's just all so real and true. Like, yes.
It feel painful to you?
It doesn't. Does it feel painful? I think I'm still there a little bit. And so I'm still in the process of being humbled. I'm still in the process of putting aside my pride. I spoke about this idea of like feeling like I needed permission to do certain things, or even like, even in vulnerability, like I'm like, I need to give myself permission to be vulnerable, bro. Like, it's okay. So yeah, I think I'm still there and putting my pride aside.
Yeah. It's been I think it's been the last few years for me, but I think I've become more increasingly aware of not just my pride, but to also know like how to humble myself. One is like we're doing that with God, but it's like even in relationships and the way that I maneuver, the way that I ask for help, the way that I receive help, the way how I engage with people, the way that I perceive people, all of that is a part of the humbling process. And then also holding myself accountable to it. Because I could easily swing myself into being like, no, you want it to be this particular way, or making myself think like it's better and justifying my pride.
Yeah.
And so it's a journey of learning like what my relationship looks like with pride. Okay, y'all, this is just a snippet into my brain. It's like me, it's a journey of like me understanding the role and the perspective of pride, of humility, understanding like where it is triggered, understanding like how I end up lying, where I need accountability, learning how learning how what it tells me about myself, what it tells me about the situation, what it tells me about this relationship. I'm processing all of these things.
Yeah.
And I've been more intentional about navigating through these things in my life because it has brought me from thinking I'm a superhuman and working within this perfectionistic realm. It has brought me from that, and it is bringing me closer to myself, and which is my humanity, but also bringing me into a more human, like, and a more authentic relationship and connection and intimacy. That's what I'm looking for. It's brought me into a more real level or concept of intimacy. Whether it might be with myself, it might be with God, it might be with others. Because let me tell you, what I think pride does is that it begins to fuel deception. And it begins to fuel confusion in ways that causes us to now have blinders where we cannot even conceptualize or understand ourselves.
Say that one more time.
Child, I gotta remember what I say.
Just that one. You just ran through it, and I think.
Let me see if I can run it back.
Just pride.
Pride
fuels deception.
Yes,
we've got to remember that. Pride fuels deception.
Yes,
that need its own
His own tagline.
It's like just it's
your own
oh my
hashtag.
God, you just plow through, and I
That
was
is
like,
it.
wait, hold
Yeah.
on, I've been lying to myself.
Listen, that's essentially what
then
that's
to
a huge
others.
part of pride.
Oh,
And
not
then to others, because
Yes.
that's the dishonesty. Like you're not being honest when
exactly.
you
Like
deceiving
all
people.
of it is just working against authenticity and intimacy and truth. And that's why I realized I was feeling further away from myself. Because I was operating in a place that was not genuine, that was not true, that was not organic.
So leading to a place of incongruency.
Exactly, fam. And I do not like that.
You know,
I don't do incongruency.
I like how you ask yourself these questions, right? Like, why am I feeling this way? Like, how did I get here? I feel like that is where I am now with like vulnerability. Like, if I'm not trying to be vulnerable with people, I'm like, what is stopping me from
Who's
getting
preventing
there?
it?
Yeah, like, is there some sense of safety that I'm not feeling? And then why? Like, is it me or is it them? And it's okay if it's them, because I'll just move on to the next person. But if it's me and these people have shown me like this sense of safety, then I need to figure out within myself, like, the pride. What is the pride that's coming in? Why am I not humbling myself to be, to submit to that idea of like, it's okay to be vulnerable. Yeah.
I think this aspect of safety, I've learned, plays a much larger role than I think we like give it credit for. As Khalees was highlighting, like with self, with others, and with God. Safety really is kind of the safety or the lack thereof, I think, is the shield or the depending factor that allows us to either lean into pursuing a thing or lean into avoiding a thing.
Yes.
And I think it really directs a lot of our decisions, like naturally, in ways that we just don't like, are not in tune with. You're talking about intimacy, and I was even thinking through in the question again of like, how do we respond to other people? I've realized the more that I observe myself that in the pulls towards vulnerability, what really helps me is mutual vulnerability. And so it's not just me trying to be congruent with myself, but when we are both being congruent with each other, it gives me more space and safety to be that way, right? But if you're trying to hold together, you're like, oh, I'm good, I'm fine, nothing's wrong, then I'm like,
I'm also
it's
fine.
just gonna be focused on me.
Nothing is wrong either.
I'm the only one falling apart. And then it makes me more afraid to not know, right? When it feels like everyone else in the room knows, I'm like, oh, it's just me. Well, we're not gonna ask this question then. Like, I don't want to be the one to say like, I don't. Even in class when I was younger, when the teacher's like, oh, does everyone understand? If everyone else said yes.
Child, let me tell y'all now, I'm gonna be that one. So-and-so? No, I don't understand.
No,
We
that's
can run
not
that
me.
back.
No, that's not me. Even in social settings, we be
Child.
sitting around the table, everybody's talking about an actor. If I don't know the actor, I'm gonna put my phone up and Google him, and then put my phone back down, and nobody has any idea.
This is
that I
one of
just
the
Googled
places
them.
though where I realized when my pride was showing up.
Oh,
And I'm like, fam, everybody in the class don't. And the thing is, I'm like, everybody in the class confused. Why all us could sit here in the confusion when we could just talk about it?
Yeah.
Oh,
because it's comfortable.
I know. I just like I get it, but I also am like, oh,
I
this
know.
is not helping us.
Countless times I've been in classes, and the one person who speaks up, and everybody else will be like, oh yeah, because we didn't get it either. And I'm like, I am also part of the oh yeah, but this pride is widespread. Is like we can be in a restaurant and y'all talking about a movie or whatever that came out. I will not ask. I will legit pick up my phone, Google real quick, and put my phone down. And it looks like I'll send a text message. It was me trying to get into the loop with not wanting to say like, no, I'm not there. So yeah, mutual vulnerability definitely plays a role, as well as intimacy in all of these ways. Safety really is the goal, I think, in all of this.
Yeah. I let me run back to that point about pride and deception. I've been thinking about this for a while because the conversation within myself started because I was noticing the incongruency in my life, but also recognizing like my own self-sufficiency and how that was now impacting everything else that was connected to me. That coupled with knowing how much it also impacts my present and my future also kind of like kicked things into drive. But then I also was listening to a podcast yesterday with Tim Ross, and was talking about favor. And him and his wife got into a dialogue about talking about like a story with like a church member or something of that nature, and like the role the deception played, to the point where now this person lying to everybody about their health, they now even lying to themselves where they start believing the lie.
Oh.
And I was like, that started to trigger the thoughts again for me. And I was like, you know what? Deception is really like a really silent but deadly emotional journey that we go through and we sometimes don't even recognize how we're opening up ourselves to it. And so we have to notice it and how it's disguising itself in certain places. And whether it might be through pride, it might be through being in a place of self-protection, whatever it might be, it's important to notice where those lies are, because that is the very thing that is keeping you from where you are. That's the very thing that's keeping you in bondage, essentially. And that for me is something that I want to be cognizant about, not letting my place get into a place of strongholds and a place of bondage. So all of this is like a part of my process, and I'm thinking to myself of like how important it is for me, like vulnerability includes honesty, and how important it is for me to also cultivate that relationship with myself.
Yes.
To find more spaces. Like if I feel like I don't feel safe with you, I don't trust you, I'm gonna have to lessen my interaction with you, because it's not helping to create an environment for me now where I can actually be honest. So now I'm now creating and just fueling this aspect of deception. That's not good for my personal self-care.
Yes.
And let me tell y'all, so many things, I'm not doing it no more. Respectfully.
Yeah.
And so that's a part of it where I don't want to do it. Sorry, I got a little passionate. I'm gonna slow down. But yeah, that's all.
Okay. I'm just more so thinking about like my interactions in relationships. Like, how have I been deceiving people in the vulnerability, or thinking like, I don't know, in thinking like there's a closer knit thing than what it actually is, because I haven't been vulnerable, or I'm giving you pieces that you think I'm vulnerable with you, but I really haven't been.
Here's what I think is important to pay attention to, and probably something that we can flesh out fully in the next episode, is we're speaking about vulnerability and safety. And we know this, and we touched on it last episode. But part of this is recognizing like what actually are my needs and how am I communicating them with people, right? Oftentimes I think the spaces that you both are describing, and I do the same, that we're like, no, I'm not doing it anymore. It's because it feels unsafe.
Yes.
Right. And our needs aren't being met. And so really acknowledging to them and ourselves that like, will I shift what vulnerability looks like with you, or be more cautious about this? Maybe. But can I also clearly communicate to you and myself why this is, right? In efforts of being kind to myself, I've recognized that here are some things that I need. And so because these are my needs and they're not getting met here, I can either give you the opportunity to meet it, or I can find spaces where those can be met.
Yes.
Right? And so certain levels of conversation, or I don't know if it's a hug or whatever the thing is. In the valley, it is easy to bleed. And it is important for us to recognize that we should not be bleeding everywhere, right? And so, like, I'm being choosy about the atmospheres where this feels comfortable and appropriate, but also being cognizant of what I need, right? If, I don't know, there's some things that, like, I'm going to go talk to a professor about, right? And there's some things where I'm like, this needs a family member, or something that, like, oh, this needs a fellow therapist. Being choosy about where I am seeking these things from, who has the capacity to give it, and really what am I asking for? For me, I realized recently, in the past few years, that I needed to gain language for what I'm asking for, as opposed to my movements were moving and I didn't have language on what I needed, right? So I was like, are you it? No, Dernick didn't do it. All right, let me go talk to Gay Lisa. Oh, Gay Lisa didn't do it. Let me talk to somebody else, right? As opposed to like, Danielle, what are you looking for? Okay, who's able to provide that to you? And so that my movements could be more intentional and less desperate. And just like, I need something to hold on to now, like help me.
Back to desperation.
Right, because it lands me in places of disappointment, with which further injures all of the feelings that I'm already feeling in the valley, right? To carry a level of desperation, unsettling, uncertainty, and then be disappointed in my reaching out for help. Danielle,
double whammy.
Danielle will retreat and be like, it's cool, I'm gonna just be by myself. And so in order to be most healthy, I need to be more choosy on where I was putting myself. So Okay, so overall, what have we learned today? We're lying to ourselves. Pride fuels deception.
Deception.
If nothing else, we gonna hold on to that one. Secondly, vulnerability, right? We're gonna be choosy about how we're being vulnerable versus transparent, all of those kinds of things. And finding spaces of intimacy. We've been talking about the valley being this place of roughness and all those things, but I think part of it is recognizing, I think Dernique, you highlighted this in episode 2, maybe, I don't remember, it was a couple weeks ago, highlighting the fact that like God is present with us in these moments. And so in the same way that we're allowing our support systems, our relationships to support us, that God gets to be present.
Yes.
As well.
If anything first.
Period.
But anyway, we could get into that.
We getting there.
time.
Yeah, we getting there. We're working on it.
Come for our lives. Come for our lives.
We're working on it.
First. Yes, he gets to be the refreshing. So yeah, thanks guys for joining us again for another conversation, and we will see you next week.
Bye.